It's a crossover episode of Locked On Badgers. I'm calling it Luke Fickell wins this weekend. The Badgers win this weekend. They're beating the Nittany Lions.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, a special crossover episode with Locked On Nittany Lions, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're going to talk about physicality at the line of scrimmage, how the Badgers can exploit it, and why I think the Badgers win this game. I think we got the upset brewing this weekend. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, with a $5 bet, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What is going on, Big Ten fans? He is Zach, Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm Ryan, Locked On Badgers. Crossover show. Huge matchup this weekend in Madison with Penn State coming into town for a night game. Zach, how you doing, man? You ready for this weekend? Are you coming?
I will not be at the game, but I'm very excited because Wisconsin is, from my point of view, peaking at the right time. I thought that this Penn State game, this wouldn't be as tough of a matchup, but as Wisconsin starts to continue to figure things out, losing both its starting quarterback and running back for the season, it seems like the Badgers are trending in the right direction. And this is a primetime game at night, as you've already mentioned.
Yeah, I know Badger fans are absolutely stoked for it. This is an opportunity. I was talking about this yesterday's show. This is an opportunity for Luke Fickell to get his first signature win. And Penn State is definitely in that tier of program where they come to town and you beat a Penn State, especially this version of Penn State, who's undefeated, ranked third in the country. That's a national type win. That registers on people's radars. That's what Badger fans are looking forward to. Can they beat a signature team? Can Luke Fickell get that first signature victory as the Badgers head coach? Have been here about a year and a half now.
And that's the discourse that I'm starting to see as well, is that Luke Fickell's a really good coach, right? He led Cincinnati, of all schools, to a college football playoff and then kind of parlays those results into landing a Power 4 job. And this is year 3, so this is kind of the turning point for him. Okay, if he's really that elite of a coach, those are the expectations, is that Wisconsin, this is almost a must-win for them, because I look at it as, well, Penn State's, hey, they're number 3 in the country. As great as this would be for our program, it is understandable if we drop that game. But the understanding that I'm getting is that, no, this is a must-win for Luke Fickell because, okay, time's running out. It is year 3. Where is that big win coming from? This is an opportunity. So I look at it as, I see it as, okay, this is excusable if Wisconsin doesn't win that game. But I guess maybe that's not the case here, Ryan.
Yeah, and it's year 2 for Fickell. But
okay.
But either way, like you can't lose every big game on the schedule, right? Last year they lost to Ohio State at home at night. They weren't able to finish that one off. That wasn't the greatest Ohio State team with that passing attack kind of floundering. This year you've already lost to Bama. You've lost to USC. You have Oregon and Penn State still on the schedule. If you don't win those, suddenly you're 0-5 in the upper tier games. Like you're 0-5 in the games that are signature events. You can't never win a big game, right? Especially when a bunch of those games are at home, when a couple of those games are at home at night. From my perspective, we kind of start the show talking big picture stuff. I think James Franklin from an outside perspective is really interesting, right? I think one of the longest tenured Big Ten coaches at this point.
11 years, yeah.
Huge. The win-loss record is incredible, and yet it feels like there's a pall like over the tenure. Like you kind of have to get to the playoffs this year, right? With the expanded playoffs. In the past, it's been easily excusable with the way Michigan has played and Ohio State has played. You got to get to the playoffs this year, right?
Oh, yeah, that would be bad if they ended up going on this massive losing streak where they drop. Okay, Ohio State is understandable because that's that's my national championship team. And I say that, I say that as the Locked On Nittany Lions host. I'm not afraid to admit that. But if you string together a group of losses where, this would be catastrophic to lose hypothetically to Wisconsin, at Ohio State in there, and then maybe the mystery team. Probably Minnesota seems to be that next toughest remaining opponent. I don't think they lose to Maryland at home. I don't think they lose to Purdue. So those are kind of the 3 that would definitely knock them out of the playoffs. You don't get into the playoff at 9-3 overall. Penn State controls its own destiny. So if they were just absolutely going to combust here in the second half and drop games that they're favored in, aside from Ohio State, they're going to be a 4-point underdog, it seems. But they're a touchdown favorite against Wisconsin. They're probably going to be a 10 to 2 touchdown favorite against Minnesota. All things if they stay consistent, right? Teams can change over the course of the season. Don't want to try to, jinx anything there. But that's the thing. Penn State's going to be favored in 11 of these 12 games. So, yes, Penn State needs to win. Like, I'm expecting Penn State to win this game against Wisconsin. I think they have a favorable matchup here against the Badgers. I'm not trying to discredit Wisconsin, but I see Penn State as the better team here. So the expectation is to win and then focus the attention on Ohio State, because that's the turning point of the season, whether you're going to be elite or be that same team that's a fringe college football playoff contender.
Let me ask you this, because you brought up the line. It's about 6.5, 7, depending on where you look, in favor of Penn State. I saw some discussion from Penn State fans thinking that would be a little higher. Well, like, what's the overall thought process from the Penn State fans on this trip? How do they look at Wisconsin? And do you think it should be higher? Were you a little surprised that this line came down to where it is right now?
Absolutely, because I think I caught it initially when FanDuel had released it. FanDuel's a sponsor across our network here, and they released it, and that was part of my promo read. I said, oh, hey, look, the Penn State-Wisconsin spread is out, and Penn State is an 11.5-point favorite. That made sense to me. But then it got pulled off the board. And then it went to 8.5, and then now it's as we sit here in the middle of the week, it's 6.5. Who knows if it changes by the time we get to Friday and then actually game day on Saturday? So yes, I am a little surprised. I thought 10.5 points was warranted. We'll give our final score predictions here, and kind of back that up in the final segment there. But to see a 5-point swing like this, it's kind of back and forth, because Wisconsin has the blowout loss to an Alabama team, has the more or less of a blowout loss, right? They were winning 21-10, and then USC came around in the second half and finally figured things out. And then the most recent streak of games for Wisconsin is Northwestern, a banged up Rutgers team, and I'm blanking here.
Purdue.
Purdue. And then, Purdue as the bottom feeder of the Big Ten this year, and might be one of the worst teams in FBS football. Okay, so we agreed that Wisconsin is starting to figure things out. I think they're peaking at the right time, but then you look at the actual results and it's like, okay, they're beating up on teams that they should be winning against, and they're losing to the teams that they should be losing against. So all things are kind of consistent here, but other people see this as, this is upset territory. This is a primetime night game. It's a revenge game for Wisconsin because of what happened in 2021. Two different regimes here, right? That's Paul Chryst versus a Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell has no stake in that, but there might be some holdover Wisconsin players that maybe see it a little bit differently. I don't know. It's different in college football because of how much turnover there is. But there are Penn State fans that see this game as a trap game.
Yeah, I think the revenge factor is probably not there. Wisconsin fans are still salty over the Big Ten title game with Trace McSorley and that group.
I think that carries more weight. Exactly.
That fans are salty about that. There's not really a guy on the roster, obviously, that was here for that, but we're still salty. Y'all stole that game somehow. Not that I'm still bitter. I'm good.
Air it out. Let it out.
Air it out. I'm good. The part of the narrative that I think is easy to do, and if I was a Penn State fan or if I was a national analyst, I would probably fall into this trap as well, is kind of what you just said. Wisconsin beat the teams they're supposed to, beat them pretty bad, but what is a Rutgers? What is a Purdue? What is a Northwestern? I think what gets lost in that narrative, and this is what gives me confidence going into this game, and I think this factors into that line being lower, is they beat those schools by bigger margins than everyone else is to some degree. I mean, you look at Oregon. Oregon just played Purdue, beat them by 35. Wisconsin beat Purdue by 45. And it's not all transitive. Nebraska beat Purdue by 7, or Rutgers by 7, and then Wisconsin took them to the woodshed on the road. Rutgers was favored in that game. Wisconsin beat them by 30-something, just trounced them. You start to look at games where Northwestern beat Maryland pretty easily, and then the next week, Wisconsin just dismantled Northwestern. All three of those schools held far below their scoring average. All three of those schools, a Purdue team that scored 49 against Illinois, they scored 6 against Wisconsin, basically off 2 turnovers. So, yes, Wisconsin is absolutely taking care of business against teams they should, but they're doing it in a manner that kind of says that they're really starting to click. Because you and I both know you can beat teams in the Big Ten in ugly ways, or you can just dismantle them. If you put 3 straight weeks on tape where you just dismantle a Big Ten team, I think there's some substance there that is beyond just who they're playing.
I think that's a fair point. I also do think it's matchup dependent, right? Rutgers doesn't have this juggernaut of an offense. Neither does Northwestern. Like these teams that Wisconsin's beating none of them play complementary football. Whereas now you're facing a Penn State team that does play complementary football. They can turn up the tempo, go quick on offense and score as quickly as 20 seconds. I think it was 13. I think they scored in 13 seconds against West Virginia, somewhere in that time frame, 15 to 20 seconds there. And then they can sustain the 10, 12, 15 play drive that just wears out a defense and keeps the offense on the sideline and keeps them ice cold. Northwestern, Rutgers, and definitely not Purdue. They can't do that. They can't play complementary football.
No, that's very true. All of those teams are lacking somewhere. And that is where, Penn State is coming in, and that's not just a level up in competition. That's a tier up. And I've told Badger fans all week, like, I think Wisconsin is going to play well here. Again, we're going to get into score predictions. They have to play really well, though. Like, this is not a game where you can start slowly. You can turn the ball over. Wisconsin has struggled with that at times with Braden Locke. Penn State's really good. The defense is there. The front seven's there. Statistically, they're holding people on the rushing attack, and then they're not letting them convert third downs. It's all clicking. So I agree with you there. It is a much more complimentary team. I'm really curious with their offense specifically, with the Penn State offense specifically, new offensive coordinator, obviously. Mm-hmm. Where are they trying to – what is the identity, I guess? Because there's two running backs I love. Obviously, everybody knows about the tight end. He's absolutely incredible, coming off one of the greatest tight end performances in history of football at any level. What is the identity? How are they going to try to attack a Badgers team that's better in the back seven? Badger fans, let's talk specifically how this Penn State offense is going to attack this Badgers defense that's playing with a ton of mojo. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers crossover. But first, a quick word for our friends of the show over at Roy. Roy app allows you to directly support your favorite athletes. Unlike collectives where you're donating to a general fund, Roy lets you pick and choose which athletes you're donating to. And in return, you can get custom content that those athletes that you're supporting create. It's also risk-free, right? If the athletes transfer, which that happens now, right? And they don't get that custom content created, that exclusive content created, you get your money back. This week, I'm choosing Tyree Walker as my Roy Athlete of the Week. Again, for the third straight week, he's just been a monster. He's just been that bell cow powering this Wisconsin offense. If you want to show a little support, you can donate to his Roy Fund to show, just a little appreciation for what he's done the last several weeks. Plus, Roy's doing their part to bring fans closer to the action, to the schools and the athletes with an exciting giveaway. Roy is giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. Here's how you enter. Just download Roy in the App Store or Google Play. Enter code Locked On when signing up, and you're entered. If you're already on Roy and you make a payment to any athletes campaign, you're also automatically going to be entered. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for official rules. Download Roy and try it out. There's no subscription, no reoccurring fees, and for as little as $10 a donation, you can get into the NIL game. Roy, support the players, change the game. All right, let's jump back into this awesome crossover conversation. It's Penn State, Wisconsin week, baby. Let's fire up. Let's go.
And it's an identity that can be whatever it needs it to be. Like I said, Penn State can go air raid offense if they need to. That's a former 5-star quarterback in Drew Allar. They have receivers that can do different things. They don't have the all-around receiver that everybody wants, everybody craves in an offense. But they have somebody that can be a possession receiver. They have somebody that can be a slot receiver that, hey, we know he's going to be open within 5 yards before the defender collapses. We have somebody that can go over the top. We have a tight end that can do it all. Take a snap, literally snap the football, or take the snap under center, go deep down the field, be a matchup nightmare for linebackers and safeties. So it's whatever Andy Kotelnicki wants it to be. Andy Kotelnicki says we'll run the ball 60, 70 times if we need to. We'll air it out 60, 70 times if we need to. So it's the fact that there's this element of surprise, this dynamic that you can't predict what they're going to do. If you guess red, they're going to go green.
Yeah, that makes it difficult for sure. Let me ask you this with Warren, the incredible tight end, who, by the way, is just an absolute monster. Did you know, was there an idea that this was coming before the season?
For Tyler Warren, I thought he was, so James Franklin had been saying it off-season, preseason, and then in the middle of the season, just kind of every time Tyler Warren would raise the bar, and he was consistent. He said, hey, most complete tight end in college football. And then it turned into the best tight end in college football. A season ago, when it was Theo Johnson for Penn State, and they were both kind of splitting reps. They were co-starters at tight end. Josh Pate, CBS Sports 24/7 Sports, had called Tyler Warren the best kept secret in college football. So there was always this understanding that if Tyler Warren gets the opportunity, he will seize the moment. So now that's here. You don't have to split reps with anybody else because it's not that, Tyler Warren couldn't do it last season. It's the fact that Theo Johnson was there, and you don't just bench another tight end that was drafted in the 4th round by the New York Giants to say, Tyler Warren is, Tyler Warren's going to be the guy because he can do these special things. They could both do special things, and it was more beneficial to have them on the field together. But when you have that, you dilute the results there. So now that Tyler Warren's the clear-cut number one tight end, did we expect him to take over and have 17 catches, 220 yards, and a touchdown and be a maniac? Maybe not. But there was this understanding that he would be all conference, be a contender for the John Mackey Award, and be drafted probably in the second round. And maybe the conversation's changing to the first round there.
Yeah, man, I think that trajectory is going up. How do you guard him? Like what have you seen? And the thing with great players is you never completely stop great players, and even when you do, it's because you're devoting so many resources to it. It's opening other things up. But is he a better cover for a big safety that's athletic and fast, or is he a better cover for a physical linebacker that can maybe be there with the line of scrimmage, or do you just got to bracket him and then say some prayers?
So Andy Kotelnicki's he's almost getting to a point where he's scheming Tyler Warren open at all times. So part of it is Tyler Warren's really talented. Part of it is you have an offensive coordinator that knows the defenses are going to try to bracket him. They're going to do so many things. And I've just said good luck. But Andy Kotelnicki is taking it a step further to say, okay, you want to bracket him, we won't even let you do that. Because that's what most teams will do. They'll concede that player and say, all right, you want to put two defenders on him? Fine, that opens up somebody else. But Andy Kotelnicki's like, no, you're going to have to triple cover him. Because we can out-scheme you to a point where the bracket doesn't work, then Warren's open, and then you leave somebody else in single coverage, and you take two defenders out of the play, and Warren's still open. So it's kind of crazy what Andy Kotelnicki can do with Tyler Warren at tight end. So let me throw this back because I feel like we're having too much of a Penn State Q&A.
Yeah.
Wisconsin on the other side, I know came in with the expectations, or at least I look back at ESPN's analytics, the FPI that they had Wisconsin inside the top 10 defensively. I think it's safe to say that Wisconsin defensively is a top half team, closer to maybe the top 25 as opposed to the top 50. But this is a team that I feel like is not living up to expectations, in my personal opinion. Is that did you view this defense as a top 10 team going into the season, top 10 defense going into the season?
No, going into the year I didn't, and I still don't think it is, because the team doesn't have a really disruptive guy on the defensive line. I think every great defense, when you boil it down to it, has a couple. You can scheme, you can have the best scheme in the world and incredible technique and a bunch of great kids in the back seven. You need a couple NFL defensive linemen. You just need, or at least one, and to be a top 10 defense, a real top 10 defense. I don't think Wisconsin has that. So I don't think they are a top 10 defense, a top 15 defense. I do think they're a top 20 defense. Like the secondary is really good. If you want to start with kind of the strengths of this Badgers defense, the secondary is really, really good. Really good. A couple NFL guys back there. There's a young freshman who's playing already. Hopefully he got banged up last week, and hopefully he's going to play. Xavier Lucas, who's really started to earn a lion's share of those reps. But Rico Hallman had 7 picks last year at corner, veteran guy. Hunter Wohler and Preston Zachman are a really, really good veteran, talented safety duo. That's really the heartbeat of this team. And then the linebackers are more athletic, faster than they were last year. Defense line has gotten better as the year went on. It's become more stout. Listen, the Rutgers team, certainly make the argument that that's a bit of a one-dimensional offense. It's not great, but they can run the ball. With that, that team is physical, can run the ball, veteran offensive line. Wisconsin just completely shut them down there. So they've gotten more physical running against the run. They're really good in the red zone. They don't allow touchdowns. It is a bit of a bend but don't break defense. When they get in there, they're tied for first in the Big Ten in touchdown percentage. They're giving up 47%. So they usually hold teams to a field goal when it gets to that point. Penn State's offensively actually really good there, which is going to be a key matchup in this game. But no, it's a really good defense. I think it's a front edge pass rusher or a dynamic defensive tackle away from being an elite defense. I will say one of the things that they've gotten better at, but they're still not there, is being able to rush the passer. And it feels like that's something Penn State has done a good job of this year, is protecting Allar. And I don't think Wisconsin's going to be able to get to them without blitzing. That's one of my big concerns in this game. How is Allar against the blitz? And how is he if he's just able to sit back in the pocket?
Allar's, either way, it's kind of a pick your poison type of thing because he handles the blitz well. He's not a statue. He's not afraid. And he's actually got great pocket mobility. He's not going to beat you with straight line speed, but he can pick up 5 to 10 yards if he needs to. So if you don't leave a QB spy out there, on a 3rd and 5, that's another player that Wisconsin's defense is going to have to account for. Then the actual blitz itself, sure, Allar has been taken down. He's been sacked behind the line of scrimmage a few times this season. I would say that Penn State's strength on the offensive line, or if I had to pick one or the other, run blocking versus pass blocking, I would take pass blocking. I think pass blocking has been better. Penn State has bailed out the run blocking with 2 elite caliber running backs in Singleton and Allen, and they're also really good at picking up the blitz as well. They are phenomenal when it comes to staying in as extra pass protection. Singleton had the one highlight where he leveled a defensive end and then went out and caught the pass in the flat and then trucked somebody for the first down on like a 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 against Illinois. So that's what, like, he can do it all on one play, and so can Katron Allen. But as far as Drew Allar goes, if you give him time to go through his progression, sit through, because Drew is very good. His best attribute is making smart decisions. Rarely does he turn the ball over. And I know people might say in the comments, Zach, he had 3 interceptions against USC. One of them was a last-second Hail Mary at the end of the game. And that's really the first time that he's thrown 2 interceptions that are consequential. He had 2 interceptions all of last season. He has 3 to this point at the halfway mark, so he's not turning the ball over aggressively. Anytime that Drew has like an errant pass or it's really bad, it's either a timing issue, it's not an inaccuracy issue, or it's him protecting the football, like saying, you know what, I see the defensive back, I'm throwing it here, but let me put it in a spot where only my receiver can get it. He's got to make a superstar play here, but an incompletion is better than an interception.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the key matchups of this game. It is that coverage from Wisconsin that they're going to try to play a lot of against Drew Allar, Warren, and those receivers.
Sounds very similar to Illinois. Like that, what you're telling me, Ryan, is that Wisconsin has similar traits to what Illinois is doing well. But go figure, because Brett Bielema is the head coach over there, right? But a team that relies on its ground game has, I would take Luke Altmaier over Braden Locke at this point. Feel free to defend the case for Wisconsin's quarterback. But I would take Tawee Walker over any of the running backs that Illinois has. Bottom line is that Illinois and Wisconsin are running similar sets where it's spread, but they're committed to the run. And then they have a really good back end of the defense, but the front 7 is questionable. So what that tells me is Wisconsin's going to prevent the big play. And this one, I won't say that it's going to be a low-scoring rock fight, but maybe not necessarily as much of the points are just going to keep, touchdown for touchdown, offensive attack trading back and forth between Penn State and Wisconsin. I feel like it's going to be, this is a must win for both teams the way that I look at it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it is going to be a little lower scoring. And I do think there's some similarities to Illinois. I think Wisconsin's defense, the linebackers specifically, are a little faster. And I think their secondary might be even a tick better. I would agree with you. I think Altmaier is a tick higher. The Wisconsin offensive line is better than Illinois, and the running attack in general with Tawee Walker and a few pieces behind him, I think is a tick better, which that's going to be a great battle. Maybe we switch it to that. Well, Wisconsin offensively, what they've done. So there's really been a mid-season evolution or update, however you want to call
peaking.
it. Yeah, peaking for sure. And they started the year with a rotation at running back that really wasn't working. So Ches Malusi, Tawee Walker, and some younger guys, Cade Yakimelli, and it felt like they just couldn't really figure out who we want to be that bell cow. And it's hard. We had Brian Calhoun on the show, who's a former Badgers running back, played for the Lions for a little bit, and he said it's just hard if you can't get into a rhythm as a running back. Well, a couple weeks ago, they said Tawee Walker, Oklahoma transfer coming in, you're going to be the guy. And he has absolutely exploded in that role. He's been great the last couple weeks, physical, always falls forward, runs between the tackles, makes a couple guys get him every time. That switch has really triggered this offense, whereas now he's that bell cow. You have a couple younger guys coming in behind him. Braden Locke has been up or down, but he's really been able to, when that running game is established, he's really been able to play off that. And he actually is a guy who'll take some shots. Unlike kind of last year, Tanner Mordecai, or early this year, Tyler Van Dyke, Braden Locke is coming in and he's giving guys shots. He's trying to air it out. He doesn't have the greatest arm or the greatest physical skill set. And some of those airing out moments lead to picks. Like he's had too many turnovers, but he is a guy where if Penn State is forced to pay a little more attention to that running game, he will pop something behind him. I'm curious that, to me, if Penn State can stop the run or if they can hold up, I know they're coming into the year, I think, giving up 3.2 per carry, which is one of the better numbers in the Big Ten. If they can hold up in the front 7, I think it's a long day for Wisconsin.
Yeah, and it's I think this is where the coaching kind of comes into play here. It's going to be a chess match because I feel like Luke Fickell can scheme some of those things. Penn State's run defense has been consistent. They've been really good. They're not to the extent like last year. UCLA and Penn State were the top teams when it came to yards per carry, and those are the metrics that I always look at. So I'm glad to see somebody else on the Locked On Podcast Network here appreciates yards per play, yards per pass, yards per carry, because you can't get a full understanding of yards per game. Because a lot happens there. So that's why, because how many plays are being run in that game? Did that go to overtime? Oh my goodness, they let up 500 yards, but how many plays were run? So you need to look at, so that's why it's important. So when Penn State faces a running team that's going to run the ball 50, 60 times, and they hold them to 3 yards per carry, that's really, like, they held the Illinois offense in check. They were very committed to the run. They said, we are going to run it on first and second down. And Penn State said, we dare you. And that's why Illinois was only held to 7 points. So Wisconsin is going to have to change things up. They can't say, okay, we'll go first down, make it 2nd and 7. Second down, we're going to try to make it 3rd and 4. No, Penn State is going to say, okay, if you want to do that, we can force you into a 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 type of situation. You're not just going to get an easy 5 yards on the ground each time. You have to do things to get creative, to get those yards. They make you earn your yards. That's really what it is defensively. They make you earn your yards. You can't just bully Penn State like maybe in years past defensively, because Brent Pry defenses were prone to a big explosive play at times. But then Manny Diaz, when he was settled in, and now Tom Allen. I mean, I think with 2 new systems like this, Ryan, for Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen, Penn State's defense and offense are seeing very good results for 2 new systems. I know the players are in place, but you still got to get adjusted to them. So the fact that I don't think Penn State has hit its peak as a team across the board, they're already putting up 30 plus points a game against quality opponents. They're already holding teams to, this amount of yards per carry or this amount of points, especially in the second half. They have been so good at shutting teams down in the second half. So Wisconsin might be in the thick of it come the first half, but the telling story is, okay, 3rd and 4th quarter, Penn State really makes its adjustments. How does Wisconsin handle that halftime break?
Well, and there's tremendous coaching firepower on that staff. If you're able to bring in, like, Kotelnicki is an offensive star. You just go back and look at what he did in
He'll
Kansas.
Be a head coach soon enough.
Absolutely deserves it. And then Tom Allen is a bona fide defensive guy. Like, the coaching talent there is amazing. So it's not a surprise to me that halftime adjustments for Penn State, they typically get an edge there. I am curious with Penn State and your thoughts on this. Have they really been physically challenged? For 4 quarters, and you could say maybe Illinois wants to be physical. Illinois' offensive line is not as good as Wisconsin's. I mean, maybe this game will tell us differently. Having watched Wisconsin, this is a really, really good physical Wisconsin offensive line with a battering ram and a couple running backs. I don't know if Penn State has been challenged for 4 quarters physically. USC is a really good team. They're not going to physically necessarily challenge you for 4 quarters. I don't think Penn State has been challenged at the line of scrimmage quite like Wisconsin is going to challenge them this year. We're going to talk about that next after a very brief word from our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is incredible, irreplaceable, undeniably the best sportsbook out there. That's why the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, baby. And if you want to go over there, you get parlays, futures, spreads, teasers. It is a great time to get into that action. Always do it responsibly, but spice up the weekend, man. NBA's coming, college basketball's coming, NFL's full swing. Obviously, college football is right in that mid peak form. This is a great opportunity over at FanDuel to get into that action. The user interface is awesome, fast payouts. It's just the best way to do it. That's why we partnered with them. Nothing but the best here on the Locked On Podcast Network, except for maybe you're Locked On Badgers host, and nothing but the best for our sportsbook over at FanDuel.com. Get started $200 in bonus bets when you place a $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's jump back into this awesome crossover episode. Locked On Badgers along with Locked On Nittany Lions. Let's go.
I would say if you're talking strictly on physicality, and that's what I'm understanding here, Ryan, Illinois would be the closest iteration of that. A ground and pound physical team that can turn any game into a rock fight. West Virginia was supposed to be that, but Penn State built such a lead that West Virginia had to throw away its game plan. So that would have been the ideal team to, hey, we can keep trading punches back and forth. Well, West Virginia had to abandon its game plan because Penn State executed really well. They did really well, and they got West Virginia. That's how you win football games. You get the opponent out of their game plan. So that's what they did against West Virginia. So that should have been that game. But since it wasn't, Illinois kept it close for the most part, and then Penn State was able to wear them down and eventually pull away. So Illinois is the closest in this conversation. Those are the 2 teams that I would say. So Penn State has definitely been challenged, USC, in terms of those physical, push arounds. West Virginia, Illinois to an extent. But I guess maybe, from what you're telling me, it sounds like Wisconsin's going to be the most physical out of anybody that I've named.
Yeah, I think the game will tell that a little bit as well. Like, I think that the funny thing with college football is you only get so few data points against a varying amount of competition in different contexts. It's always hard to know for sure. I do think if this game, you mentioned the second half adjustments for Penn State, and I think that's a legitimate thing. I think that's real. I also think if you're a Wisconsin fan and you want to look at it through that lens, if this game gets into the third or fourth quarter, I think Wisconsin fans and that offensive line, you're going to feel confident if it's a game that you can start to wear on Penn State a little bit, depending on the depth in the front seven. I'm not fully sure what that depth looks like or even what that injury picture looks like necessarily. But that is where Wisconsin is going. At least Wisconsin is going to feel confident. Now, whether or not that's going to translate to the game, they do feel that they can wear out teams where they can grind them down a little bit and they can go 3 or 4 deep at the running back spot. So I'm curious if the game gets close, if that starts to play a factor, and then Penn State maybe does have to bring someone down into the box and then Braden Locke can hit one of those shots. To me, that's a game script. If Wisconsin does win this game, and they are an underdog for a reason, Penn State is the more talented team. But if Wisconsin does win this game or make it a game, I think that's the game script. It's that running game, wear them down, and then hit a couple play action shots, RPO shots over the top.
Well, that James Franklin's definitely aware of Vinny Anthony. I know that Will Pauling is the most targeted player, but Anthony is that guy that can, stretch the defense, hurt you over the top. And I think Penn State is just, they've seen it before. If they can force it, and that's the thing, the key for me is to forcing, Penn State's going to want to build a lead. Because I think Wisconsin wants to, hey, we can wear you down and stay in this game, kind of turn it into more of a rock fight. They don't want to get into a shootout with Penn State. Braden Locke isn't built for that. Will Pauling, Vinny Anthony are quality receivers from what I've gathered, but those guys, that group can't take over games and get into a shootout against a Penn State team that I think can handle it. Penn State showed that it can handle a shootout against USC. Penn State showed that it can handle a rock fight against Illinois. So I think if Penn State's able to build a 10-point, 14-point lead and then just eventually wear down Wisconsin the way that Wisconsin has worn down other teams, that game plan executed to perfection against Northwestern, Penn State's going to say, Wisconsin, here's a taste of your own medicine, and kind of do the same thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. If Penn State's able to get ahead and force Wisconsin into some concepts outside of its comfort zone, that's a problem for Wisconsin. Wisconsin's game script to winning is narrower than Penn State's in terms of variability.
Yeah.
Penn State can win in different ways. I think Wisconsin can win in a more specific way, but I do think they can win in that way. I don't think that is an outlandish thing for them to accomplish. The thing with these night games, these environments, there's an argument this is a bigger game for Wisconsin than it is Penn State, especially in the scope of a 12-team playoff. Penn State has Ohio State on the schedule, right? They have potentially bigger fish. I hate to say it, I'm a Wisconsin guy, but like Ohio State for a Penn State fan, a player is going to register at a different level than Wisconsin. This is a huge game for Wisconsin, night game, home game, coming off momentum, which matters in college football. It matters for young players. It matters for adults, having that momentum 3 straight. I think all those intangible things factor into Wisconsin. The bye week's interesting to me. Penn State coming off a bye week. That can sometimes lead to slow starts. It's also great to have your players healthy and rested in 2 weeks to prepare for opponents. But sometimes you see teams come off a bye and it takes them half a quarter, like a quarter to get into it. That's another factor that's going to be interesting to track as this game goes on.
I think that, Penn State's prepared for it, right? They've done it all season being that second half of a team. I think the bye week's actually beneficial for them. I don't expect them to have slow starts as frequently down the, there's only 6 more games for Penn State, but I don't think that will be as much of an issue down the stretch because all of the problems that Penn State has, it's not a talent problem. It's a timing, it's a communication, it's a simple, small X's and O's execution type of thing. The only way you're going to get better is when you actually play tangible games. You can only learn so much about yourselves in practice. You actually have to play an opponent that's trying to stop you, and that's where you make adjustments because everybody's pushing the boat forward, right? For Penn State, they're all trying to do the same thing to reach a common goal. While Wisconsin's trying to, all these other teams are actually trying to limit Penn State as best as they can, and they don't care what the result is as long as it's in favor of itself, right? So in Penn State's case, I think the bye week's going to help them not only to, yes, get healthy, be rested, long trip out to Los Angeles, and then you got to go back on the road to a top. Like that's one of the best environments in college football is Camp Randall. Like I do not question that environment that Penn State's going into for a night game, and I think that helps Wisconsin's case, and maybe that's why the spread has moved the way it has. But I also think the bye week is helping Penn State in a way to work on the little things and fine tune some things that can take them from a great team to an elite playoff, like a deep run playoff team. Wisconsin's going to test them though. Wisconsin's a good team, but I like all of the. I don't think that there's really any significant mismatches here, Ryan, when it comes to Wisconsin versus Penn State. I think there are for Wisconsin, but not in Penn State's case. Anything that Wisconsin throws at them, they can handle.
I'm interested in if there is a key matchup that you're looking at. Because for me, one that I had circled is that red zone, right? As Penn State, Wisconsin has let teams go on some drives this year, but again, in the red zone, they've really tightened up statistically. Number one, actually tied number one in the conference with Washington, just holding teams out of the end zone, forcing field goal attempts. Penn State's been pretty good there. Again, 71% of their trips into the red zone end in a touchdown. It's going to be good against good in that situation. To me, that's a big matchup. If Wisconsin can limit Penn State in those moments, hold them to some field goals, maybe even keep them out of the field goal range a couple times, I think Wisconsin potentially probably wins this game if they can win that battle. Is there a battle you're looking at potentially, good versus bad, or a matchup? You said there were a couple that you think really favor Penn State in this tilt.
Well, now after you telling me that Wisconsin's secondary is better than what they've seen against an Illinois, I'm looking forward to seeing Penn State's passing attack versus Wisconsin's secondary. See how the receivers are doing, because they can go to a Tyler Warren, a Julian Fleming, a Liam Clifford, and Amari Evans. I'm sitting off rattling names for Wisconsin fans that are probably like, we can handle them. But it's the fact that Drew Allar has a bunch of options to go to. It's not one or two select guys. And Liam Clifford's gone over 100 yards in a game. Amari Evans has done it twice. Trey Wallace has done it. Tyler Warren's gone over 200. So you have to account for those guys. And then both running backs out of the backfield that can be on the field at the same time, or one at a time. So it's not like Drew Allar has, if you take this guy away, if you take Tyler Warren away, where does he go? He has legitimately 5 other options that he can rely on. So I'm eager to see what Wisconsin's pass defense does against a pass offense for Penn State that I think is only going to get better. And then how does Wisconsin control the football? If they do if they can play this where they can ground and pound, try to wear Penn State's defense out, play ball control and keep it a 1-score game, or if Penn State's able to build that 10, 14-point lead, how does Wisconsin get back into it doing something they're not comfortable doing?
Yeah, I think that's a really tricky one if Penn State gets up. I almost think that's one of the keys to the game. Wisconsin can't let Penn State get 14 up, 10 up. They have to keep them at arm's length. And that could be down 7, and that's fine. Yeah. You got to keep it within a distance there. You want to do game predictions as we're kind of wrapping this show up? We're at about 33 minutes.
Yeah, we can do. I think final score predictions are fitting here. If you want to go first, because From what I'm hearing, you think that Wisconsin's going to pull off the upset. And I do agree that this is more consequential for Wisconsin, because if Wisconsin believes that it's a dark horse playoff contender, you lose this third game, like Wisconsin's out. Penn State already ended USC season, so now Penn State can do the same thing if Wisconsin's not careful.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say too, I think there's probably that narrative out there because the playoffs. I don't think Wisconsin is a dark horse playoff contender. I think they still have Oregon coming up. I don't think they're going to beat Oregon. That's going to give them 3 losses, and 2 of them not exactly pretty. So I do think, though, Wisconsin is trending in the right direction, right? I think momentum is building. And college football's odd. The better team on talent doesn't always win. And if you go to a team that's playing with a lot of momentum, has figured some things out offensively, the defense is peaking, and you have to go to their house after a bye week, I do think sometimes that translates to a lull. I tend to think Wisconsin is going to be able to have some success on the ground against Penn State. Braden Locke has showed when that happens, he's able to exploit some one-on-one matchups. You mentioned Vinny Anthony. That's another guy that's come up recently. Like, he's really exploded onto the scene. Prior to last week's game, he was averaging 26.09 yards per catch. Again, small sample size, but he's given lightning to this team that hasn't had lightning on the edge in a long time. So now you have a burner to go with that power running team. It's a healthy team right now. It's a team that's found its stride. And I also just don't think Luke Fickell is going to lose every tough game he plays. And I think they're going to end up losing to Oregon this year, which means I think he's got to trip up Penn State. So it's a combination of coaching, the team peaking, being healthy, and finding some identity on both sides of the ball. And I do think that line reflects some of that. I think that line is looking at this team and saying, you know what, nationally, if Wisconsin does trip up Penn State, and it is an upset, it would absolutely be an upset. Yeah. But I don't think nationally people are going to look at that and be completely shocked, because I think this team is peaking. This Wisconsin team is peaking in the right moment. So give me Wisconsin, close game. Penn State's obviously very, very talented, but give me Wisconsin 27-24.
Okay. I think that would go over the total as well. That's over 47. So if the spread's going to sit around 6 or 7 points, total's at 47, 48, give or take. I like Penn State 30-20 against Wisconsin. I think that road environment is a good one, but I still believe from what I see, going to practice, from what I hear, that Penn State's better days are still ahead. So the USC win, the West Virginia game, all of those other games leading up to this, they're 6-0 for a reason. They're number 3 in the country for a reason. It's not just a mirage. There are people that say that Penn State is extremely overrated. They're barely a top 10 team. And Penn State can't help who it plays. They have to win the games that are in front of them. This is another one. I think Wisconsin poses a very tough test. I like that they're going to Camp Randall, another tough environment, but that bye week was so important for them. Hopefully, now I hope the only reason Penn State loses this game is if they beat themselves. Look past Wisconsin to Ohio State, or you're stuck behind you in Los Angeles, because that was a lot of emotion. That carried a lot of energy. Does Wisconsin offer that same kind of juice? I would hope so, but I'm not in the mind. I don't know the psychology of what Penn State is thinking as a team. I know the 1-0 mentality, but this certainly can be a sandwich game because of what happened at USC and then what lies ahead in the team that has kept you down for the past decade.
You also owe us one. We talked about the Big Ten championship game. You might.
It's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be that easy, though.
No, I definitely don't think it's going to be easy. I do think Wisconsin's going to win, and partially, listen, I'm going to be there, so there's a part of me that's just hoping that happens, because that place is going to be wild. But for all the Penn State fans coming, I hope they have a great time. Camp Randall is an electric place at night. Wish nothing but the best for the travels. Hope you have a sad travel back for all the people embarking out, but I hope you have a good time up to that point.
Well, I appreciate that, Ryan, and it was great to do a crossover episode to get both perspectives together for Penn State and Wisconsin. So, of course, thank you for your time.
No, 100%, Zach. Same. Appreciate you. Too bad I can't see this weekend, but I'm sure we'll hook up in a future game.
Absolutely.